Okay, here we start our second topic, topic 2, human resources, and specifically human resources management. We're looking at the management function of using and developing people within a business, again, in order to meet the objectives of the organisation. A lot of different roles are encompassed here, and we're going to cover these later in the unit. We'll start off with workforce planning, move into recruitment, selection and induction of new employees, training and staff development, performance management and performance appraisals, the promotion and sometimes relocation of staff within an organisation, reviewing remuneration packages, disciplinary and grievance procedures, looking after the welfare of employees. Human resources, fundamental to any business. People are typically the greatest asset. And if we have a look here, we'll have some statistics. You can see that highly engaged employees miss 20% fewer days of work and are almost 80% more likely to be top performers. So the best engaged are the best performers. Right, we're just about to see a short video now, and it's about Zappos. Have a think about this question as you watch this short video.
Hello, I'm Paul Michelman from Harvard Business Digital, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Bill Taylor. Bill writes the Game Changer blog for harvardbusiness.org. Bill, welcome.
Great to be here.
Great. Bill, the subject of our chat today is online shoe retailer Zappos. And among other things, Zappos is known for providing some rather extraordinary customer service and for engendering a really deep level of commitment and engagement from its customers. So, Bill, one of the tried and true principles of management is you can't have deeply engaged customers without deeply engaged employees. And yet, in your post on Zappos, you write about a rather unusual policy Zappos has of actually trying to bribe its employees to quit. Can you connect the dots for us here?
Well, it's unusual, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Zappos, they're growing fast. They're up to 1,600 people now, just a huge employment growth rate, and they're really committed to filling the company with employees who are equally committed to engaging with their customers. And it's one thing when you recruit and you evaluate and you interview and you try to educate people about what they're signing up for, but they don't really know until they arrive. So on the first day at Zappos, you begin a 4-week deep immersion, not just in how to talk to customers, but in terms of the company's culture, its values, its incredibly high energy. And about a week into it, Zappos stops the training and says to everybody in the room, basically, we'll pay you for the time you've been here, and if you agree to quit today, we'll give you a $1,000 bonus, no questions asked. And the idea is to allow some number of people who are probably sitting in that room saying, my goodness, I kind of like it here, but I had no idea what I've signed up for, and I'm just not ready to step into the kind of intensity and energy that Zappos is expecting, and it gives people a low stress, low risk, and actually kind of rewarding way to opt out at that point. And about 10% of the new recruits to the call centers take them up on that deal, and Zappos thinks that's money very well spent because they're really trying to fill the organization with the cream of the crop. Not that there's anything somehow wrong with people who choose to leave, but it's simply not the right fit for them. And so rather than not, trying to get people not to admit that, hey, it turns out this is more than I expected, they give them the opportunity without a lot of guilt and actually with a little change in their pocket to opt out. It's worked very well for them.
So it's really the first stage to developing the kind of engaged employees they need to be the breakthrough company that they are.
Well, it's actually kind of the second stage because they really think hard and very creatively about the interview process. The Zappos job application is kind of entertaining. You begin with actually completing a crossword puzzle, believe it or not. And I don't think there's no great social science research behind it. It's just a signal to people that this is not your run-of-the-mill company kind of deal. They've got 10 very well-developed values. They ask questions that are probing quite specifically into, do the values of the people they're evaluating sync up with the values of the company itself? And I think they do a very careful and very creative job of doing that. But even with that, you're going to hire people, you're going to invite people in where the fit isn't quite right, and that's where the $1,000 bonus comes in. And by the way, it started at $100, then they raised it to $500. It's now $1,000, and as the company continues to grow, they're thinking of raising it again because they say, you know, we're willing to spend. One of the things that happens as companies get bigger and bigger is that they tend to bland themselves out, and the hunger to just get more warm bodies in there because we have so much work to do overcomes the commitment to having only the right kind of people. And so one way to try to keep that quality up is to keep raising the size of the bonus.
Great. So Zappos employees aren't just engaged, they're deeply empowered. And I think if I read between the lines of your post, one of the reasons they've been able to grow so successfully is they push so much responsibility to the front lines of their workforce.
Quite right.
How do they do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say they're not just empowered, they're borderline insane. And I mean that only in the best sense of the word. I was out there a few weeks ago to sit down with the CEO, Tony Hsieh, and do a tour. And they have 1,500 vendors, and so the vendors are coming through, all the shoe companies, all the fashion companies, so they're coming through all the time. So they're very systematic even about giving a company tour, and I did the tour with the CEO, but other people do the tours, and they walk through the office with this giant flag, which is the tour flag, which lets you know that you're sitting in the various departments, a tour is coming through, and each department has its own crazy cheer, you know, shish boom ba, or somebody rubs up with pom-poms, or they do clapping. It's really kind of a wild scene. And again, this is now with vendors and visitors, and they're trying as a group of individual people to make an impression on you and to make Zappos be a memorable company to experience, whether you're buying something for them, selling something to them, or just coming to see the company. In terms of empowerment, I mean, basically the biggest form of empowerment, certainly in the customer service side, is no scripts, no time limits. You are basically authorized to do what it takes to make the company, make the customer happy, satisfied. And so and there are lots of legendary stories about Zappos employees who go way beyond the call of duty to meet the needs of their customers.
Can you tell us one of those stories?
Well, one, it became a real internet sensation about a year ago when a fairly prominent blogger who was a Zappos customer bought a bunch of shoes for her mother, who it turns out was terminally ill. And so she bought 10, 12 pairs, something like that. And the Zappos return policy is, at that point, you had 15, you free delivery. You have 15 days to figure out, do I really want the shoes? And if not, you've got to return them, free return as well. So the 15 days had passed, and she hadn't returned the shoes. And so she got a pretty standard email from somebody at Zappos saying, hey, it's been 15 days. Is there anything wrong, or are you planning to return the shoes? And she, after a long day at the hospital with her mother, she sent an email back saying, oh, I'm sorry, my mother is terminally ill. I'm going to try my best. And by the way, part of the deal is you've got to go to a UPS store to actually return the shoes. So Zappos emailed back at me and said, oh my goodness, we had no idea. We'll send a UPS truck to your house to pick up the shoes. We would never expect you to go anywhere. So they did that the next day. She returned the shoes. Then the day after that, she got a knock on her door, and it was a UPS driver with a beautiful bouquet of flowers from Zappos saying, we're so sorry to hear about your mother. We just want you to know that we at Zappos are thinking of you. And she was, as you might expect, pretty overwhelmed by this. She went to her blog. She wrote a post called I Heart Zappos, told the story, and oh my goodness, it just was viral beyond belief, to the point where, over the week or so after that happened, if you Googled Zappos, one of the absolute top hits you would get is the story of this woman and her thing. And again, brilliant PR, good viral marketing. It was nothing like that. It was just human beings acting humanly with the people who are doing business with Zappos. And, their theory is if you encourage people to do that, it's going to cost you a few bucks, but the benefits you get over the long term are really quite tremendous. And by the way, also, it becomes the kind of place that people want to work. I mean, it's not a very glamorous job, answering phones 8 hours a day from customers. It's not the most exciting work in the world. So if you can give people more of a sense of fun and meaning and connection, I think it pays big dividends as you recruit employees, not just as you recruit customers.
So that's one, I think, great takeaway for any manager who is watching this or listening to us today. Make things fun. It'll transfer to the customer experience. This is a pretty crazy company, though. They're in Las Vegas. They're an online company. They've got a CEO who blogs. They all Twitter.
Yep.
Are there other things from this culture that the rest of us who work in more mundane organizations can apply?
Well, I think the first big insight is they're not a technology company, even though they'll do $1 billion of sales this year over the internet. They do understand that fundamentally they are a customer service company. And so Zappos was actually started in San Francisco, but they moved it to Las Vegas because they felt the culture of San Francisco was way too focused on technology per se as opposed to customer service per se. And Las Vegas, with folks from the hospitality industry, as we say euphemistically, as well as a big call center operation. So everybody who walks in the door understands from day one, we sell shoes today. We sell handbags now in fashion. They're going to be selling consumer electronics. They are building a customer service platform, and everybody understands that job one there is to connect with the customers, to the point where if you're hired as a very senior executive or a very nerdy computer programmer, you take a short class, a short form of the 4-week customer service training, and you spend a week, everybody spends a week working in the warehouse in Kentucky shipping out the product, because they don't want you to then become a marketing person or an operations person and forget what they, so that's insight number one. Number two is a customer service culture is only as strong as the employees who own it. So Zappos every year puts out a 300-page employee manual culture book written by the employees themselves. And you can actually buy it on the site. They sell it to other people who explain the company. And so the sense of the employees really own the culture. Whatever form that culture may take is another important takeaway.
Bill Taylor, thank you very much.
Great, thanks. It was fun.
To read more about Zappos and other innovative companies, you can visit Bill's blog, The Game Changer, at blogs.harvardbusiness.org.
Right, the genius behind Zappos' human resource strategy to pay employers to quit. Pay them even before they start working. Zappos is now up to $2,000 to any of those employers that make it through that 2 or 3 week training program. $2,000 or $3,000 then goes on the table. They can walk out, take the money and run, or they can stay and start working for the company. Now, for human resource management is all about getting the most effective workforce for your organization to meet your organization's objectives. Getting rid of these people for a mere $2,000 is just genius. It costs money to train people. That 2 or 3 week training program is going to be nowhere near the end of their training. They're going to have months and months of ongoing training and support on top of that. And if you can get rid of the people that are not going to fit in, these are the people that are going to cost your business money no matter what. Whether you pay them $2,000 to leave now, or whether they're the big drag on productivity that occurs throughout their, in all likelihood, short-term career with your organization. And the employers that buy in, they're just going to be gold. These are the people that are determined to work for your company. They're determined to be the best that they can be. And especially in a business like Zappos, which is built solely around people. And remember, customer relations is all about people. People dealing with people. What a genius human resources strategy. And here, even from a financial standpoint, the idea makes increasing sense the more you think about it. Most CEOs agree turnover costs tens of thousands of dollars in recruitment, training, and lost productivity. So yeah, there we go, tens of thousands of dollars. So identifying the misfits early, the cost of just 1 week's salary, that could just be the best deal the company can make. What would you pay to get a full-time, week-long look at the recruit's character, work habits, and social skills prior to making a commitment to them? It seems to me that this practice does one other thing for Zappos that might be the most important. Zappos is forcing itself to do a good job filtering people on the front end, creating a place where people want to work. Key. A place where people want to work. People want to come in, day out, wake up on that Monday morning, enthusiastic to get to work. These are the people that are going to make your business zing. Our first in our human resources section, 2.1, human resource planning, sometimes referred to as workforce planning. Now, this is a management process of anticipating an organization's current and future staffing needs. It includes the number of employees required and the type of workers sought. Are we talking about graduates or ICT literate workers, manual labourers? And anticipating the human resource needs of a firm can be carried out by looking at several things. Firstly, the human resource managers can be looking at historical data and trends. So data on trends such as the rate of change in the size of the workforce over the past few years, or the shift to part-time and flexible working hours, can assist management in their planning. Sales and income levels. The more a firm is selling, presumably the more it is producing, the more staff it's going to need. If there's an increase in anticipated demand, then the human resource management people are going to get in there, identify that, and start the recruitment process to bump up the level of workers. If income levels in the economy or in a specific market segment are forecasted to grow, this will lead to an increase in demand and presumably an increase in the amount of labour that the firm is going to require. Thirdly, we have labour turnover rates. This measures the number of employees who leave a firm as a percentage of its workforce per year. Take the number of workers leaving, divide it out by the total number of staff, you have got your labour turnover rate. 100 staff at the business. We've got 23 staff leaving during that year. We've got a labour turnover rate of 23%. Fourthly, demographic changes. Now the government produces data regarding changes in the demographics of the workforce, such as changes in the number of female workers in the economy or the number of graduates, and this can help managers to forecast their human resource needs. Technological changes. Advances in technology such as e-commerce can bring both opportunities and threats. There are employment opportunities for people to work from home, for example, and conversely, firms that are capital intensive may not require as many workers in the future. Human resource managers anticipate this. They'll be looking at which staff to make redundant and specific skills that they're going to need in the future in their staffing. Supply of human resources and demographic changes. On the video now, a few scenarios are going to come up. I want you to think about how the following demographic changes that these scenarios identify could affect the human resourcing of a business. Firstly, in the States, businesses at the moment are having huge headaches trying to get skilled workers into their businesses. They're not able to find enough skilled graduates coming out of America's universities and technical colleges to meet the human resourcing demands of their businesses. Now, most countries will have a skilled migrant category where it's quite easy. You can't meet the demand for skilled staffing with your own citizens, then it's usually quite easy to get people that can meet those skill requirements from overseas. New Zealand is unfortunately famous for training up people and then sending them overseas. So 25% of our most highly skilled people leave the country. Most of them go to Australia, but we can see that they're leaving to all over the OECD. 1/4 of New Zealand born people with tertiary educations now live overseas. Now obviously, all things being equal, this is going to make it more difficult for New Zealand firms to get those skilled workers that they require. The Japanese population is aging. As the workforce ages, the workforce shrinks. So shrinking workforce it becomes more and more difficult for Japanese firms to meet their staffing needs. There are just fewer people to select from. Here's an interesting one. Unemployment. We all know since the big bust of 2008 that unemployment has been much higher than it normally has in just about every country we look at least every developed country. But unemployment, while causing problems for businesses, the economy has less income to spend, so that hurts their demand for goods and services. But it also frees up a lot of available workers. So businesses can pick and choose from those workers most suited to their workplaces. It also puts downward pressure on wages. So perhaps in times of low unemployment, wage rates tend to rise quite quickly. With recession, wage rates tend to keep quite flat, which is good for businesses. A lot of countries over the last few years have increased the retirement ages. Increased retirement age, increase the pool of available workers. Women. For the longest time now, women as a percentage of those employed have been steadily increasing. In most economies now, the amount of men and women employed are roughly even. And it's quite interesting as well, because not only are women becoming a greater share of the workforce, but they tend to be more highly skilled as well. They get better grades at school than boys, more go to university. Any organisation that can target, attract, recruit these skilled women are going to be doing very, very well. Now, the whole point around these demographic changes, businesses need to be able to identify and understand these changes so that they can make the appropriate response. Net birth rate. Countries with a high net birth rate will, in the long term, have a larger supply of human resources, making it easier to get the staff that you need. The net migration rate. Are more people coming into your country than leaving the country? If the net migration figure is positive, then the supply of human resources will increase. The retirement age, we just briefly touched on that. Back in the bad old days, retirement age was 50. It went to 55, 60, up to 65. A lot of countries have just bumped it up a couple of years. I think Australia's now 67, the UK is 67. The later the retirement age, the bigger the pool of workers for businesses to meet the human resources needs. Flexibility of the workforce. Businesses or countries that have multi-skilled people tend to have more flexible workers. Businesses that employ a large proportion of part-time workers, such as fast food restaurants and supermarkets, are also able to take advantage of workforce flexibility, as the supply of labour can be quickly changed according to the needs of the organisation. Mobility of labour. This refers to the extent in which labour can move to different locations. It's sometimes known as geographic mobility, and their flexibility in changing to different jobs. This is known as occupational mobility. The more mobile that workers are, either geographically or occupationally, the higher the supply of labour tends to be. Okay, there are other factors affecting the supply of labour. factors that need to be considered. A big one is competition. Right, existing and potential workers will consider the overall package of financial and non-financial factors offered by a business in relation to those provided by its competition. How good is Google to work for compared to IBM? A less favourable package being offered to employees may mean less supply of human resources to that firm. Cost of living, another important thing to consider. Cost of living in a particular area. Now, although more people tend to live in cities, the higher cost of housing and other expenses may deter others from locating in these areas. So, reducing the potential supply of labour to a business. A lot of people would not have the money to locate to Manhattan, for example. Transportation is another important one, specifically the cost and availability of transportation. Businesses that manage to locate themselves or have the good fortune to locate themselves in areas with good transportation systems will tend to attract a larger supply of workers. Those living or working in remote areas may need to rely on private transport, which could be both costly in terms of the money that you have to fork out for getting to work each day, but also time. It's a brave person that wants to spend an hour and a half commuting to work in horrendous traffic and then another hour and a half commuting back. Workforce planning, human resource planning, the process of anticipating the current and future demand for workers in an organisation. Now, this is going to require businesses to be prepared for supply changes in the labour market. Now, planning the human resource needs of an organisation requires consideration of the firm's level of demand for labour. Simply put, how much labour does the firm need now? How much does it anticipate that it will need in the near and medium term future? Anticipating the demand for workers. Several factors can be looked at. Firstly, historical data. Changes in staffing allows a business to identify trends. For example, if workers stay on average with the company for 5.5 years, then the human resource department can plan around that sort of figure. The more information the business has about its previous employment history, the better able it is to plan its recruitment needs, as it can anticipate the likely number of new recruits that are required. But past data is not always indicative of what will actually happen in the future. Flexibility and workload of employees will provide information on whether to either raise or reduce the demand for human resources. If we have a highly flexible workforce, we may be able to cope if there's sudden change to staffing, a sudden increase in demand, perhaps a sudden decrease in demand. In a firm where people are over-specialised and the workload is soaring, it may be necessary to employ more workers. Highly specialised workers are not going to be able to fill in for another specialised worker that's just left the company. The skills and expertise of existing workers may mean that they can be reassigned to different jobs if they're flexible enough and when necessary. Demand for a certain type of worker increases. Perhaps some workers can be shifted there if there's enough flexibility in their training and their skill level. A restructuring of human resources, such as management opting for a smaller hierarchical structure, we're going to come to that later, that's in Unit 2.2, will also affect the demand for labour. Capital intensity, the opposite of labour intensity really. It measures the amount of capital usage in comparison to other factors of production. An automated business such as a car manufacturing plant, think Toyota, huge investment in capital equipment, robots replacing workers. Any change to automation will result in a business requiring less labour. So you could imagine Toyota back in the old days when they had workers instead of those robots. They were screwing in the bolts, assembling panels. Along came the robots, displaced the workers. A low capital intensity, this is the opposite. Low capital intensity means high labour intensity. There's a lot of labour compared to the capital machinery involved. It's going to require the business to hire more workers if output is going to be raised. So, for example, if waiting lists for a national health service are to be reduced, it's likely to require the recruitment of more doctors and nurses. Work study is a scientific management tool. It's aimed at measuring the best way to complete certain processes. So if we can have a look at the jobs that are required to be done and break them down to who does what and who does what when, then the most efficient path to completion of that job can be identified and used to increase productivity. Increase productivity, you can perhaps reduce your labour. Derived demand, coming straight from economics. The level of demand for labour, like all other resources, depends on the final demand for the good or service, the product that's being produced. So if there's no need for a school to hire German language teachers if students don't opt to take the subject. Derived demand, German language teacher out the door. Increased student demand for business and management, more business and management teachers walking in the door. Derived demand, what's demanded needs to be supplied. Who can supply it? Those with the skills. The Human Resource Department is going to have to analyse jobs. Before recruiting new workers, they're going to need to assess the routine tasks and responsibilities that the job requires. What is it that needs to be done? Who are they responsible for? Who are they responsible to? What skills and training are needed for them to be able to do that job? Qualifications and personal attributes. Are there specific qualifications that are required to enable a person to do the job? Is there a specific personal characteristic that the job requires? Customer service. You obviously need to be bubbly, happy, smiley, helpful. One of those people that like to help people. These are the sort of personal attributes human resource management will be looking at when fulfilling their customer service related recruitment needs. They're also going to have to look at the rewards needed to recruit for the position. Now this is namely the salary or wage rate. If they pitch the wage rate too low, they're going to have trouble staffing that position. There may be other benefits that are required. Recruitment and selection. Essential to the running of any business. Remember that labour is one of those 4 factors of production necessary for the provision of any good or services. Now, hiring the right person, hiring the right people helps ensure that the business can function effectively. Now, it's quite a time-consuming job and it can be rather expensive. It's crucial that managers ensure the procedures in place for recruiting the people that the business needs is as effective as possible. Now, recruitment often begins when the vacancy becomes available within the organisation. The business has expanded or somebody is left and it's necessary to replace that person. The first thing they're going to have to do in advertising for the new job is to come up with a job description. Now that's a document that outlines the nature of a job. So the roles, the tasks and responsibilities. It's used not only for the recruitment of a person for the job, but also for a performance appraisal of employees. Once there's a job description, you can match how well the new employee is fulfilling his or her new job. Next we have the person specification. This is a business document that gives a profile of the ideal candidate for a job, their skills, their qualifications, experience, and other personal attributes. Your turn. Why is it necessary for a business to produce well-defined job descriptions? We're specifically looking at you incorporating these words into this paragraph. Attract the right, inappropriate candidates. What job entails? Sifting through applications, people applying, costs, potential applicants, time spent, conflict about, answering questions, time spent, prevent too many. Okay, a quick summary of the recruitment process. As we speak, a list of activities that the human resource managers are required to do are popping up. Your job, in a second, is to list these in chronological order, in time order, from first to last. So the human resource management role, you need to list these activities in chronological order. It's probably a good time to pause the video now, come back and check your answers in a second. Right, first things first, perform job analysis to determine the firm's need to hire. Write that job description and person specification. Using these, we'll advertise the post. Once we've got applications coming in, we'll screen them and come up with a short list of those most suitable to the position. We'll interview those on the short list. The longer your short list, the more costly it is for your business. We may or may not test the aptitude of the candidates. Whether it's appropriate or not, it's an issue that the Human Resource Department is going to have to work through. Check references. Come up with a job offer. Cross your fingers. Hope your ideal candidate is willing to sign the contract of employment. And then we'll begin the induction and training program for the new recruit. Summary of the recruitment process. Job interviews.
How would I describe myself? 3 words. Hardworking, alpha male, jackhammer, merciless, insatiable.
Right, what not to do at a job interview. Interviews are all about getting a better idea of what the applicant is like, isn't it? Well, not really. Interviews are not actually that good at predicting how well someone is going to be at doing their job. Not only are interviews time consuming for everybody involved, but they're not necessarily the best way of finding the right person. To better improve the chances, the likelihood, the success of the interview, finding the right candidate, Interviews must be structured with their content. Different candidates must be being asked the same questions. The responses should be recorded so they can be reviewed at a later time. Each candidate can be compared with the same question. Have a look at their answers, compare them against all the other candidates. And we call that an evaluation structure. So a checklist of things that should be asked, explained, gone into, discussed. Questions in the interview can be behaviour based. These are good. I explained an example of when you led a team successfully to complete a difficult job. And they can be situational based. For example, if one of your team members was consistently late for work, what would you do? These type of questions are some of the most commonly asked. The costs of getting it wrong are large. The interview process is a costly, time-consuming process. Get it wrong, 6 months down the track, you'll be going through the same process again. Human resource managers will be involved, senior managers will be involved, department heads will be involved. Time-consuming. Not only that, loss of productivity as well, getting the wrong candidate in.